Welcome back, team. So perhaps the most important video, how do you balance being a super athlete with your social life? But in all seriousness, guys, do any of you guys actually have a social life? You're training BJJ, hashtag BJJ lifestyle. Do you go out, do you party, do you drink? Oh, you do? Maybe I've got this wrong.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Anyway, guys, in all seriousness, how do we balance having a drink, having some nice food, having a social life, meeting friends, etc., with trying our best to optimize ourselves in the gym and on the mats? Well, the first thing to do, guys, is go back to the nutrition video and review that. Hopefully in that video, I've talked over why we don't need to constantly be eating clean, why we can afford to have some treats and some less kind of nutrient-dense food in our diet. Now, when we kind of span this out, how do we deal with eating out? How do we deal with having, cheat meals? How do we deal with drinking alcohol? There's various tips and tactics, guys, but the first thing I want you to know is all of that is part of a balanced and healthy lifestyle, and all of that will only, when done right, help enhance your training, enhance your recovery, enhance your mental well-being, and mean that you can stick to this type of lifestyle and this type of training long term, rather than it just being a quick hit. One of the things that's very, very prevalent in combat sports is the idea of a camp. So a period of time where you eat in a certain way, you train in a certain way, which essentially is unsustainable until you reach a certain point, and then you basically go the opposite way out of it. Now, there's always going to be a place for a camp to really elevate things to the next level, especially when we start to talk about cutting weight. But you don't need to be going from here to back here again. There's no reason that we can't be going along like this with a little camp and then carrying on afterwards. What we would need to do to achieve that is have an approach to your nutrition, your training, and your social life which fits your entire lifestyle. So let's first of all start with how can we approach this as a week-to-week thing. One of the things that works really well for me is the cycling of calories and macronutrients, which means I will have higher and lower days. If I know, for example, on a Saturday, I'm going to be eating more food, drinking more drink, I'm going to be going for a social occasion, I will try within the week to have a couple of days where I reduce what I'm eating down to a lower level, still a satisfying level, not starving myself, nothing along those lines, just reducing the calories slightly to bank those for later on in the week. What's important to think about is that food doesn't exist on a daily scale. It doesn't mean that when we go to bed, boom, those calories are cut off. We want to think about it in long term. So let's simply just think about it as a weekly amount of calories. If we've got this amount of weekly calories to eat, we could eat them all in one day or we could eat them all in 1 week, but it's the same amount of calories overall. So again, one of the good tactics to use is to reduce a day slightly to enhance a day slightly. One of the tactics that we could do for this is we could implement calorie restriction, or we could implement some degree of fasting. And this is what I like to do. There's two approaches that I use with clients. One is going to be just a normal kind of 16-8 fast, and one is a 24-hour fast. Let's take the first one first. So all this would require, guys, is a period of time in the day where I am not eating. So a great example of this is you go to bed 10 o'clock in the evening, the next day you don't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock. This would give you a very big window of not eating, and if you're used to eating breakfast and maybe a snack before you get to your lunchtime, that's taking out 1 meal and 1 snack. If you did that for 2 days, then you would have 2 breakfasts worth and 2 snacks worth that you could potentially add on to your night out or to your weekend day. This would allow you a lot more calories to play with and potentially would allow you to more easily fit in some foods and drinks that you like. One of the other approaches that I learned from another coach, which is a really good tactic, I've used it myself and it works better for some people, is that if they have a really, really high calorie day, for example on a weekend day, then the next day they would take a fasting day. Now this doesn't need to be a complete zero input day. What I would normally recommend is what I would call a protein sparing fast. So I'd use something like protein shakes periodically throughout the day to make sure that my protein's high, that I don't kind of sacrifice any muscle tissue. But it's an incredibly low calorie day and it allows me to have offset a very high calorie day. Now, both of these approaches aren't magical, guys. All you're doing is controlling the amount of calories that you're eating. So this also could be achieved by several low days of calories. It will all come down to your mindset. Some people would rather have one extreme day with a lot less calories than 3 moderate days. But whatever works for you guys, that's a great way to offset a higher day. So let's talk about going out to a restaurant. If we're going to go out to a restaurant and eat, one of the best things that I would recommend doing is looking up the menu in advance. If you can get the nutritional information, then get hold of it and track that meal first of all. So put that meal in a bank and know roughly what you're eating, and then work backwards throughout the day. So if you're going to go out for a large pizza, you're going to have an ice cream afterwards, you're going to have a drink, etc., the calories might be high enough that we need to have a very small lunch and a very small breakfast. Or we may need to implement some of the fasting that I've talked about, or some of the calorie restriction that I've talked about. However, if you looked at the menu and you were going to have, say, a steak, a side salad, you're going to have, water to drink, etc., you might not be having as much fun as the pizza, but you would be allowed to eat more in a day as far as your overall calorie allowance. So one of the things that I would always recommend doing is planning that meal in advance. You could even plan it a week in advance, give yourself something to look forward to, as far as you're kind of following your nutrition goes. But what I wouldn't do is eat normally, turn up to my night out, turn up to my restaurant, and then feel like, oh no, I'm not sure I can eat what I want to eat because I've already eaten X amount in the day. So I'd always use one of those methods, pre-planning or some type of calorie manipulation, to allow me to enjoy that time out. The other thing to remember, guys, is that depending on how often you're out, how often you go out for dinner, how often you go out for drinks, is going to have more or less effect on your overall approach. So if we're talking about like a monthly night out, it's not going to write off days and days and weeks of good progress. If you're going out a lot, every single week, multiple days, then you probably need to have a more considered approach. Let's talk a little bit about alcohol. So I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons. Now, overall, if we're drinking alcohol within a kind of normal limit, we're not drinking it to excess, then it's not going to really have a negative effect. If anything, quite a lot of the time, it's going to help you relax. It's going to help with mental and physical well-being, as long as it's not taken to excess. When we take it to excess, that's when it can have some detrimental effects, both short and long term, on our athletic performance. So one of the main ways it does this is that alcohol is a diuretic. So what it means is that it dehydrates your body. When it dehydrates you, it can affect you in a way that means that your liver produces less glucose. Less glucose basically will bring your performance down. So this is why, say you've had a night out and you go and try and train the next day, you sometimes feel like you're not really operating, at the best level you could. You may even find day-to-day life quite difficult. Just kind of getting by on a Sunday morning can be quite tough after a tough Saturday night. Some of the other things that it can do is it can impair muscle growth through protein muscle synthesis being downregulated. It can also decrease HGH secretion, which is human growth hormone, which is part of the way that we sleep. We recover when we sleep. We recover our muscles. It also, if we're drinking to excess, it can inhibit nutrient absorption and it can increase body fat levels. But as part of a balanced diet, there's no reason why it can't be something that we utilize and that we use. The same as if we're eating to excess or doing really anything to excess, it can have a detrimental effect. So I talked about one of my clients. I'll omit his name, but basically he was a pretty overweight guy and he came to us to get in better shape for grappling and just for his general lifestyle. And for the first month, he really stalled and we couldn't work out what was going on. He seemed to be following everything. But then it came apparent to us when we sat down and had a chat with him that Saturday night was a big night for him. He liked to go out, he liked to hit on girls, he liked to drink a lot of drink, and then he used to eat like a takeaway or something on the way home. Now, on paper, you think, oh, can that link up with a grappling lifestyle? Can that link up with a training lifestyle? And it can if it's planned. So from that point forward, the way that we looked at it was Saturday was always going to be a very decadent day. He wanted to drink, he wanted to be out socialising with his friends, and that was a really important factor. So all we did is that we made sure that every other day supported this one big day at the end of the week, and boom, amazing transformation, amazing pics, you can see them. He put on a lot of muscle, he lost a lot of fat, gained loads of confidence, performance was right up as well. So it can all be balanced, guys, but it's important that we address everything and we pre-plan it. So guys, social life does not need to be sacrificed, okay? Whatever it is that you like to do, whether it's going out to eat, going out to drink, going out to socialize, as long as we approach it in the right way, we make sure that we are cycling our calories and planning our nutrition around it. We're going in knowing what we're going to do. We're not just turning up and making snap decisions on the spot. And we are being somewhat moderate with our intake. So if we're having a very high alcohol or a very high food consumption, we're offsetting it on other days, then you can have a great social life and you can still perform like a beast on the mats. So in the comments below, guys, I'm going to include a small cheat sheet, and it's just going to give you a few alcohol choices that you can have on a night out if you wanted to keep your calorie consumption down. Now, as always, guys, you can have higher calorie drinks, you can have any drinks that you want, as long as you kind of go in knowing what you're doing and you kind of drink within a level of moderation. It won't have a huge impact on your training, especially, guys, if it's not every single day or very, very frequently. But check the cheat sheet below, guys. You can save it to your phone, and hopefully, whilst you can still see that screen in the bar, it will give you some good choices.